I put before you today 10 propositions that to my mind describe the current state of the world, and in each case how Bharat would and should respond. So let us begin. First, there has been discernible, even if uneven, progress in economic and political rebalancing of the global order. The G20 has overtaken the G7, and many new groupings and mechanisms have come into being. The list of the top economies of the world has undergone change, and India itself has moved up 6 positions in the last decade. This change is real, but it is imperfect and it is incomplete. It will continue to unfold, but not always in a linear fashion. While many objective conditions have improved from India's perspective, the struggle for cultural rebalancing has only just begun. To be conducted on a global stage, it must first be progressed at the domestic one. This battle is on. Economically, Bharat's answer is in greater Atmanirbharta, and politically, a more authentic and rooted representation that will contest the propaganda which will favor the compliant and the discredited. Bharat will never shy away from questions, but equally, Bharat has the courage to question the questioners. Second, even as these trends unfold, we have been subjected to decadal shocks. There is a backlash against globalization and an assertion of identity and of autonomy. This is visible, for example, in the politics of the US and of the UK, and it continues to gather steam. It has been vastly aggravated by the trauma that COVID has inflicted on so many societies. And if you add to that the changes in Afghanistan, the fighting in Ukraine, the conflict in West Asia, each has its own lessons. Factor in as well the implications of sharpening big power competition. The world now looks more volatile and uncertain, demanding independent and confident thinking from us. We have seen that already when it came to our energy procurement choices. Bharat chose the interests of its domestic consumers by resisting external pressures. Similarly, by questioning widely prevalent globalization mantras, we stood up for our workforce, we stood up for our SMEs and industry against unfair competition. Third, in such a world, the calculus of national security has understandably become much more complicated. Traditional methods of competing and pressurizing are buttressed by new tools of influence and disruption. Here too, Bharat has pushed back with determination and fortitude. When we were challenged on the LAC with China in the midst of COVID, our rapid and effective counter deployments were the appropriate answer. Not just that, by seeking to rectify the long neglect of the border infrastructure, we have made the defense of the nation much more effective. On the larger stage, when it came to the Indo-Pacific, we held firmly to our decision to establish and take forward the Quad. On the Western Front, the long-standing challenge of cross-border terrorism now elicits more befitting responses. Believe me, Uri and Balakot send their own message. Fourth, economic security is no less demanding, is no less important. The world today confronts the reality of massive over-concentrations created by misplaced globalization. The resulting leveraging, the opaqueness and the distortions are key concerns not only of the international economy, but to global security as well. Unlike the past, Bharat does not accept that openness to the world justifies undermining level playing fields at home. On the contrary, it now seeks to build the deep national strengths where technology progress rests on the foundation of better manufacturing. Our goal is to participate in resilient and reliable global supply chains, especially when it comes to the industries of the future. The digital era, similarly, puts a premium on trust and transparency. There are good reasons why we have been prudent about certain games and apps in recent years. The compulsions of a more intensive decade also require us to prepare more seriously for a global workplace. Upgrading our skills, promoting talent and innovation, making it easier to do business, and supporting national products are all facets of the transformation underway. Fifth, the global south today is strongly aggrieved at the treatment meted out to it. The COVID challenge showed how exposed it was to health vulnerabilities. Thereafter, the Ukraine conflict brought to the forefront its energy and food insecurity. In a world of rising debt, significant inflation, and trade disruptions, it is truly struggling to make ends meet. The regression in SDG progress and the fight for climate justice have become lightning rods. In this dire situation, Bharat serves as a voice of the global south. Equally important, our achievements are a source of motivation. Whether it is the India Stack or the Chandrayaan, the Covaxin or UPI, the global south takes heart from the example of Bharat. I can testify from personal experience how interested the global south is in our socio-economic delivery and good governance practices. Sixth, global conversations now increasingly speak about an emerging multipolarity. The reality, however, is that preaching is not the same as practicing. After all, we also witness the advancement of hierarchical frameworks, unilateral initiatives, and attempts to restrict choices. A multipolar world must necessarily have a multipolar Asia at its center. Bharat will simultaneously pursue both goals since they are closely interlinked. And that pursuit is best done by insisting on mutual sensitivity, mutual respect, and mutual interest. It will insist on adherence to agreements and compliance with international law. Seventh, it is sad but true that multilateralism in the current era stands gridlocked. None of the major challenges of recent years have seen a collective and consensual response. Not just that, it is also a fact that global commons stands neglected and global issues are regularly shortchanged. The natural response is to press the cause of reformed multilateralism, particularly the reform of the UN Security Council. This is a subject of intricate and involved diplomacy, but at the same time must also be highlighted in public forums. The pressure for change is manifest and yet requires enormous effort to be brought to a tangible conclusion. In the meanwhile, our interests are best served by working with the like-minded and the convergent. In this decade alone, we have joined almost 40 different plurilateral groupings in different domains. For the foreseeable future, that apparently is the way forward. Eighth, even as the world changes, we must be cognizant of the reality that the old order coexists with the emerging trends. Managing a long twilight will be a very complex responsibility. And yet, it must be one undertaken with the requisite understanding and the dexterity. Bharat perceives the distinction between being non-West and anti-West. It is not our interest that in trading places we end up with a more adverse situation. Finding common ground, even while asserting our own identity, is therefore an essential requirement. Ninth, a world of new balances is coming into being that features a repositioning of the US and the rise of China, and amongst other developments. It is also one of sharper East-West polarization, currently focused on Ukraine, but not necessarily limited to it. At the same time, there is a deeper North-South divide revolving around concerns of development, debt, resources, and equity. We faced the entirety of these complications during our presidency of the G20. In response, we were not only able to achieve consensus, but also produced impactful outcomes on key issues. In doing so against such daunting odds, we were able to demonstrate that the quest to be a Vishwamitra has actually struck a chord with the international community. And finally, 10th, the global debate usually posits nationalism and internationalism as binary choices. Perhaps these are conclusions driven from the experiences of others. Bharat's story is very different. It is one of rejuvenation and resurgence at home, but more contribution and responsibilities abroad. Vaccine Maitri, International Solar Alliance, and a development partnership in 78 nations are proof of our commitment.